So I'm going to go away. I'm all set. Thank you. Thank you.
Jess, can you confirm that we are
I'll give you a call.
live?
I got you on speed dial.
Yes, YouTube is up
Bye-bye.
and live, and we have folks watching.
Wonderful. All right, everybody, I'm just gonna let folks in just because I know we got a bunch waiting, and we'll get started in a minute. Good luck.
Welcome, everyone. We will get started in just a moment. Welcome, welcome. We will get started momentarily.
Kathleen, I'm ready whenever you are.
All right. Well, welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's Lunch and Learn, Banning Aerial Herbicides in Maine's Woods. The increase in aerial spraying of herbicides for forestry management runs contrary to best practices and state policy, but it is on the rise. LD 125, an act to prohibit the aerial spraying of glyphosate and other synthetic herbicides in Maine's woods, would put an end to this harmful practice. Let's go to the next slide. We are thrilled to have the bill's sponsor, Senate President Troy Jackson, with us today. He is joined by Peter Haggerty, who brings 40 years of experience in logging in Maine, Mitch Lansky, who's the author of Low Impact Forestry, Forestry as If the Future Mattered, Jim Garrettson from Wood Prairie Organic Farm in Bridgewater, and Heather Spalding, Deputy Director of Maine Organic Farmers and Gardeners Association. Welcome to all of you. My name is Kathleen Meal. I'm the Director of Policy and Partnerships at Maine Conservation Voters and Maine Conservation Alliance. Our organizations represent more than 8,500 members and supporters dedicated to protecting Maine's environment and our democracy. MCA does that through education, collaboration, and advocacy, and MCV by influencing public policy, holding politicians accountable, and winning elections. Next slide. A few technical notes for today's event. We will hear from each of our speakers and tackle questions for all of them in the Q&A at the end. You don't have to wait though. You can send your questions to me, Kathleen, through the chat whenever they occur to you. You can find that chat by hovering your mouse over the bottom of your screen. I'll keep track of the questions and ask all of those of our speakers during the Q&A session at the end. If you have any technical difficulties, you can message Will Sedlak through the chat. This event is being recorded and the video will be posted on our website later this afternoon, along with recordings of all of our previous Lunch and Learns. Thank you again for joining us. Heather, I will let you kick things off.
Thank you so much, everyone. My name is Heather Spalding, and I am Deputy Director of Maine Organic Farmers and Gardeners Association, MOFGA. For those of you who don't know MOFGA, we're a statewide education, training, and advocacy organization. We're creating a food system that is healthy and fair for all of us. We are helping farmers thrive, and we're making more local organic food available for everyone. We're building sustainable communities. We do a lot of work with low impact forestry. We have an organic certification program, and many of you may know us through the Common Ground Country Fair, which is our signature annual event. We have been really busy in the legislature this session. We've been focusing on bills having to do with climate change and the implementation of Governor Mills' Climate Action Plan. We focus on farm viability bills, organic integrity, organic research and education, social justice and equity, of course, and human health and the environment. And I would say that this bill that we are talking about today applies to all of those issue areas. MOFGA is a proud member of Maine's Environmental Priorities Coalition. We have been with the EPC, I think, since the beginning. And we are so thrilled that this is an EPC priority bill, and that we have the opportunity to work with Senate President Troy Jackson to pass this essential legislation. This bill is going to be an important step toward reducing Maine's reliance on pesticides, which is in fact a policy of the state of Maine. We just haven't really been living up to that, but it is a stated policy that we need to reduce our reliance on pesticides. So prohibiting the practice of aerially spraying herbicides for silvicultural operations is a really important way to make that happen. We've had a lot of questions from the public and even from members of the Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry Committee about the scope of this bill. This bill doesn't ban pesticides in general. It doesn't ban aerially spraying pesticides generally. It doesn't ban glyphosate generally. Rather, this bill bans a specific class of pesticides, herbicides, of which glyphosate is one, used in a specific application method, which is aerially spraying the pesticides, and for a specific industry, which is forestry. So it's a chunk of the overall challenge that we have in reducing our reliance on pesticides, but a really important one. And excuse me, this bill is a reboot of prior attempts to address the extremely harmful practices of aerially spraying herbicides in plantation-style forestry operations. In the last legislature, President Jackson introduced this bill, and the ACF committee basically tossed it out. They just called for more research to be done, and that was really a bummer. We don't think more research needs to be done. We know that there's a big problem, and we know we have to take action. So this bill has come back in its original form and its original intent, and we're very excited about this. And we feel that if foresters were actually following the voluntary standards that they espouse of protecting the forest and minimizing their reliance on pesticides and actually taking a more precautionary approach, we would be making a lot more progress. So we need to do this, and I'm really thrilled that we have such great witnesses who've had decades and decades of experience with these materials and with these practices, and they know that we can do this, we can make this change, and it will be all in the best interest of Maine's people and Maine's economy and the health of Maine ecosystems. So I'm really glad that you all tuned in today, and I'm looking forward to hearing from everyone.
Thank you so much, Heather. I really appreciate the specific details of this bill and hearing, it's a really important piece, but not maybe as expansive as opponents sometimes paint it. Senator Jackson, thank you so much for sponsoring this bill. Would you tell us a little bit about why now, why this bill?
Sure. Well, thank you, everyone. I'm sure most of you know, but I live in the town of Allagash, way up northern Maine, and I'm a fifth generation logger. I'm not the last generation. I actually have a younger son. And to be honest, probably 20 or more years ago, I probably would be on the other side of this issue. But even 20 or so years ago, even though I might have been on the other side, I would have been conflicted by it because, throughout my time, in the logging industry, seeing this done, I didn't like it. I didn't think it was good. I've had large landowners tell me from the start that this stuff is safe. I've had them tell me and others in public forums that this stuff is safe to drink, which is incredibly hard to believe that anyone would ever say that. But the mindset that I and many others in this industry grow up in is that you're not supposed to say anything. You're not supposed to get out of line. You're certainly not supposed to say anything that, would be against what the industry wants. And it's just really hard to get out of that mindset. But as time has gone on and I saw more and more of this, and I saw not only the effects of what it does, to the land, but what I feel it does to the effects of the animals in my area, I've just come to the realization that this stuff is not good. I mean, I'm not a scientist. I'm not anything extraordinary, but I can see with my eyes what's going on, and I don't believe it's good. And I can't justify the fact anymore that staying in conformity with what the landowners wants is good for my area, is good for the people in my area, and is good for the people in the state of Maine. This stuff, as we've gone on and got more and more information, there's all kinds of science that says that it isn't safe. It isn't safe for people. And when you look at the areas of the state of the Maine that I'm from, we have an extremely high cancer rate to start with. I can't say that it's the stuff that it's using, but when people that do have degrees in science and pesticides tell me that this stuff does increase the rate of cancer, well, it seems like there may be some connection there. And, the other thing that I think has really put me to this point is that more people in my area that have that same mindset of, you're not supposed to say anything. This is the industry that we have, and this is how most people make their livelihood. More people have reached out to me, through time, come in the same conclusion that this isn't good, that there is a different way. There used to be a different way of, trees being harvested and just natural regeneration, which is much better obviously for the area and I believe for the product. But I mean, I have had more and more people come forward and ask about this, ask why the state won't do it, ask why, I'm not willing to do it. And even after last session's attempt to try and ban it and having, the committee come to Fort Kent to have a forum, people have still reached out and wanted, this legislation to go forward. And so I think just time, realization of what it's done to the area, and my own obstinance that I'm very upset with the department of turning a blind eye onto this, not being willing to even listen to the people in the area about how their concerns are. I think it's important. I mean, I think that people are coming awake. Their eyes are being open to this problem, and the realization that there is a different way. I mean, this doesn't have to be done. This wasn't always the way it was done, and logging continued. Probably was more prosperous before. So that's really why I'm back. Once again, I'm glad to have the support. There's no doubt that this is not an easy issue for me to go forward with as far as for some of the optics of my district and stuff like that, but I just know it's the right thing. And I've just gotten to the point where I can't justify letting it happen anymore. I just can't. And I mean, there's no good benefit. And in my world, I think there's a lot of risk, a lot of destruction for it. And I think we got to do something different than what we are currently. So that's why I'm here, and I appreciate the opportunity today.
Senator, thank you so much. Your leadership is just so powerful on this issue in particularly because of the personal evolution that you've experienced. And I'm really grateful for you articulating how tough it can be to stand up to vested interests. So thank you. I know there are folks in your neck of the woods who really appreciate that, and we're going to hear from some of them today. I am going to turn it first to Peter Haggerty. Pete, tell us a little bit about your experience over the years.
Well, good morning. I'm honored to think that my experience in the forests of Maine might be of some value as the legislature addresses this important issue. My wife and I moved to Maine 46 years ago. I exaggerated my experience as a woodcutter and joined a local crew in an adjoining town. Every morning, 2 men and a team of Belgian horses arrived to yard my logs. It was love at first sight, and I have been blessed with a team waiting for breakfast in the barn ever since. Logging back then was transitioning from draft to mechanical power, and woods teams were becoming scarcer by the day. What my first team, Barney and Nick, did for me was to open the door to a generation of folks who had worked these animals since before I was born. One thing these men and women would reiterate over and over was their belief that with a machine you can bull and thrash and go over the trees. With horses, you need to go around. You take more care. I remember the first day I had Barney and Nick home at my farm. My dad and mom were visiting, and I was having trouble harnessing the team for the first time. Just then a total stranger drove by, backed up, and got out of his truck. "Hello, my name is Dwight," he announced, and handshakes all went around. He then stood there quietly, taking in the horses and the proud parents. He chose not to intervene as I struggled with the harness. My dad was a furniture maker, so they chatted a bit. Dwight then cleared his throat. You know, Peter, I could be wrong, but all the collars I've ever used fit like this." And he gently twisted Barney's collar from upside down to right side up, and all the rest fell into place. Dwight is in his 90s today and often is in the driveway making helpful suggestions. I logged for the next 46 years on paper company and private land, and many retired teamsters would often show up to urge me on. Working with draft animals slowed me down and helped me to love the trees and the animals that surrounded me every day. Sometimes in the spring, a deer would walk into the yard and the horses would greet her with a whinny. I remember these days as happy times, but in the back of my mind, there was the not so distant memory of a war in Southeast Asia, where I had worked for several months before moving to Maine. My new neighbor building a house just through the woods had recently shared with me that he was suffering from exposure to Agent Orange, an herbicide that the US military sprayed in Vietnam from 1960 to 1971 to strip the forest of foliage and expose enemy movement. Over 20 million gallons had been sprayed onto US and Vietnamese soldiers and civilians during this time as a defoliant. I was there in 1970 and I can remember its smell to this day. Dow Chemical assured us that it was safe. Since that time, thousands of veterans have been profoundly affected by this chemical. Many, like my neighbor, with a total disability. Vietnamese children are to this day born with serious deformities linked to this herbicide. I have grandchildren that today run through the forest, free of such memories. They hug my big 180-year-old tree and joke that if they lived in the woods, they would live forever. The clean air and water of my forest have made this a place where I can forgive some of the past, celebrate the present, and look forward to the future. Let's keep the forests of our state safe for ourselves and our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your emotion and for reminding us all that this is personal and it's urgent. Really, really appreciate that. Mitch Lansky, I think there's a better way, and I don't know it, but I know you know more than just about anybody else on what a better way might look like. Could you tell us a little bit about forestry as if the future mattered? Because as Pete reminds us, I think it does.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
We can.
You can, okay. I might turn off my site because I have a really bad connection, but I'll talking about herbicides. Herbicides are just one tool in a management system called intensive management, or IM. Intensive management starts with a clear cut and is an attempt to have higher yields by doing early stand management, such as planting, herbicide spraying, or pre-commercial thinning. Without clear cuts, there is little excuse for aerial spraying of herbicides. While it might increase yield in the future by concentrating growth on softwoods and shortening rotations, it is a poor strategy for protecting biodiversity or increasing forest carbon storage. There are, of course, other issues. If IM is used, for example, then you end up with an ugly wreck. I never said I was good at spelling, but
Uh-oh, I think we may have lost. Did we lose Mitch? Oh. Mitch, you muted by mistake. And you may want to turn off that video because we're starting to have a lag.
can you hear me now? Okay.
Yeah,
Can you hear me now?
go ahead, Mitch, but I suggest turning off your video because we're getting a little bit of a lag.
You can hear me now? I'll stop. Okay, I've stopped the video. Okay. Intensive management starts with whole tree clear cuts. Okay. Whole tree clear cuts cause the most drastic impact that any logging can, except if the logger digs up the tree roots. One would think managers would increase rotation time after such cutting to allow full soil recovery, but with intensive management, rotations are shorter, not longer. Heavy disturbances, like whole tree clear cuts, are often followed by proliferation of pioneer species, also called brush, that grow fast and stop the leaching of nutrients from the soil. Managers target this brush, which can include hardwood trees, with herbicides to speed up the rotation. If the stands get too crowded due to proliferation of what they call volunteer trees, trees that plant themselves, the intensive management might be to do pre-commercial thinning with brush saws. In either case, adding or subtracting trees, the goal is to reach an ideal spacing of trees for optimal growth. Comparing the average growth per acre per year of spruce and fir plantations on good sites to the spruce and fir in a control, and that would be a clear cut with no follow-up management at all, can look impressive. One industrial company claims a 400% improvement from the growth of a plantation. But there are facts that are left out of this comparison. The best growth depends on several major factors. One is soil productivity. Better soils are more apt to be found on hardwood or mixedwood sites, and hardwoods can outgrow softwoods on such sites. Managing for domination of such sites by softwoods is either simplification or stand conversion. Another is having optimal use of growing space, as we were just talking about. Full stocking on good sites does not require plantations. It can be achieved with other management systems, including shelterwood and selection. A third issue for optimal growth is the species grown. Over decades, having a diversity of species, including hardwoods that are adapted to the climate and site, would be an advantage over growing a softwood monoculture. Given the increased instability of the climate, a diversity of species seems a logical choice to increase the chances that some trees will survive over the long run, even if others are stressed. Most of the spruce being planted in Maine, however, are boreal species adapted to cold weather and poor soils. The climate is getting warmer, not colder. Species for biodiversity.
Looks like we lost Mitch for another moment. Just flipping through to see if he's on somewhere. Some of you know that we have featured the need for broadband.
How much did you lose? I'm sorry again. Yeah. How long was I out of touch?
Just a moment.
Did you hear anything that I said?
We have heard a good portion, I think. Did you want to add just one more thought before we turn it over to Jim, or where? I'm not sure where you are in your comments. All right, I think we're gonna take a tech break for Mitch. And Jim, thank you so much for being flexible and ready to jump right in. You want to share your experience? Jim Garrettson?
Turn on your mic, Mitch. Jim.
Yeah, shut it off.
Yeah, I need to.
There you go, Jim. I think you're unmuted now.
All right, hit the wrong button, sorry. So I'm Jim Garrettson. My family and I have been farming organically in the unorganized territory of central Aroostook County for 45 years. Behind me, I've got an aerial photograph that my daughter took on the inbound United flight on New Year's Day a couple of months ago. And it shows our farm and the neighboring industrial forest land. So I thought I'd maybe use that to give you a view of where you're at, because a lot of people have never been up to Aroostook County. So right here, kind of hourglass shaped field is 50 acres of our land. And for perspective, this is Boot Foot Road here heading east. US Route 1 right here is going north-south. If you went up that way, Presque Isle is in about 20 miles. And then south, Holton is in about 20 miles in the opposite direction. So the land next to us, when I came here, when I was 21 years old, it was owned by Great Northern, And where we have a pond right now, right on the corner, there used to be a horse hovel where 7 teams of draft horses would be housed at night so that the loggers could cut. This would be back in the 50s and 60s. Cut the land on the Great Northern. So our township is virtually all paper company land. We're completely surrounded by paper company land. And a few winters ago, one of the landowners clear cut the land. And we're very concerned that the spray drift is going to go off target and hit us. And if it does, will be a catastrophe for our business. If we get contaminated, we'll lose our MOFGA organic certification, and that will basically collapse our business. The dozen employees we have working for us will be out of work. What we raise, our primary crop is Maine certified seed potatoes, and we began a mail order business 30 years ago. And we have customers in all 50 states. And at this time of the year, it's the busiest time of the year for us. We're sending thousands of packages every week to gardeners and market farmers across the United States. If we got sprayed, the drift coming over would basically put us out of business. And this isn't just theoretical concern. Back in 1979, during the Spruce bedroom suppression project, we were accidentally sprayed with a chemical 7. The chemical name is carbaryl, but because of that, we lost our MOFGA certification for 3 years. If that should happen now, we'd be out of business. And the idea that you can spray and not have this drift go off target, I just do not believe it. In fact, 79 was when we got hit that same year down in Dennisville in Washington County. They were spraying herbicide and they had a disaster down there. They had off-target spray drift of up to 12 miles. So I don't get any assurance from the state that there's adequate precautions. Either there can be negligence or accidents or drift of some sort, and it's just a risk that is too high. I want to tell you about a forum that Senator Jackson put on in Fort Kent in September of 2019 at the university. There were probably 30 or 40 citizens. They got up and they basically expressed their support for Senator Jackson's bill to ban aerial spraying. In fact, the only ones that were in opposition to the ban were those employed by the paper companies. The citizens in Allagash, that Maine's largest township with 77,000 acres, they have voted to ban herbicides in that township. The forestry companies still work in that township. They still make money in that township, but they're not using toxins that can drift off site or can get into streams and travel, or can get into animals that are living on the wildlife that are living on that land and roaming about. So to me, it's a new era that we're in. We have to pay attention to the environment. We have to protect the environment. We have to protect the citizens. And I really encourage everyone to get behind Troy Jackson and his efforts to protect Maine, especially rural Maine and rural residents, by supporting LD 125 and finally banning the aerial spraying of forest herbicides. Thank you.
Jim, thank you so much. What a devastating story. I mean, it is just, I don't blame you for not trusting that this is not You're not going to experience off-target spray drift because
Okay,
you already
Kathleen,
had.
could you hear that?
Yes, thank you so much. That was really, really helpful. And I also appreciate you beginning to talk a little bit about the opposition this bill might face, because we have had such a powerful lineup of speakers this morning. It's hard to
Kathleen, were
imagine that
you
opposition.
able to hear what I said?
Yes, yep, we heard you loud and clear. Thank you, Jim. Let's put up the call to action slide, because I have a feeling, judging from the smiles and the nods and the emotion on the Zoom, I can tell that there are a lot of folks who are ready to jump in and let our lawmakers know that this is important to us, to protect Maine's land and water, wildlife and people. We really do need to pass LD 125 and ban aerial herbicide spraying for forestry practices. Later this afternoon, you'll all get an email with the link to today's recording. Several of you asked in the chat if you could share this around. Please do. We will also include a link to a fact sheet about this bill, which I think I might have neglected to note that this is a priority of Maine's Environmental Priorities Coalition. So we have great fact sheets put together on all of our priority bills. And we'll also include a link that makes it super easy to send a message to your state representative, to your state senator, and to your governor, to let all of those decision makers know just how important it is to ban aerial herbicide spraying for forestry practices. We have some great questions already in the chat, and you can feel free to keep sending those directly to me. But let's kick it off with a question to Senator Jackson. Do you know where the administration stands on this bill?
Yeah, well, at this point, it's pretty clear that the administration is against the bill. They spoke in opposition. I think there's people on the call today, actually. But, you know, they said that they are basing their decision on science, which I disagree fervently with. I mean, there's all kinds of science that says this stuff kills people, kills animals. I mean, to be perfectly blunt, anything that'll kill a hardwood tree, I think, is going to have a devastating effect on humans and wildlife. And like I said, Jim referenced the fact that we had the forum in Fort Kent, which actually was the committee, the ACF committee, held a joint hearing there in Fort Kent to hear testimony from people in the surrounding area. And the department chose not to go. And when I asked them why they didn't go, they said because the Forest Products Council told them that they wouldn't be welcome, which is amazing to me that, that's who we're listening to on this issue. But anyways, it's really clear the administration has come out in opposition to the bill. So it would be great if people could reach out to the administration to voice their support for this.
Thank you. That's a disappointing update, but makes it clear how important it is for each of us to take that next step of advocacy and let the governor know how we feel about this one. I have a couple of questions about how we quantify and understand herbicide impacts. Is the state or some other entity tracking herbicide residuals? Heather, this may be something you're the best one to tell us, like what the historical data looks like, and just put that piece in context for us.
Sure. I can talk about the state's efforts to track sales and use data of pesticides generally. and also maybe talk a little bit more about the specific concerns around glyphosate, which probably people know generally, but there are some recent studies that really are very alarming. So on the note about, you know, Maine's got we have a state policy that, you know, requires us to work toward, you know, minimizing our reliance on pesticides throughout the state. The Board of Pesticides Control for a while was doing that and was tracking the sales and use data, but kind of let go of it. And it's been a real problem because, you know, as one of our board members always says, you can't you can't manage what you don't measure. And we don't know. We really don't know how much the quantities of pesticides, what kinds of pesticides are being used where and when. We certainly don't have accurate data throughout, you know, forestry operations in the state, and we need that. But the Board of Pesticide Control is starting to focus on that, and we are going to be advocating for a comprehensive system that will track and show publicly, you know, what kinds of chemicals are being used where, when, on an annual basis. And so I think Mitch actually might have specific details about some of the reports from some of the forest industry reports on what they've been using over the years. But I did want to just mention a little bit more detail about glyphosate in general, because it's a huge concern, and it is the most commonly used herbicide in forestry. The World Health Organization has classified this as a probable human carcinogen. It is also linked to chromosomal damage, fetal development harm, reduced liver and kidney function, and endocrine system disruptions. And so the chemical giant Bayer purchased Monsanto in 2018 to kind of give cover from the name that was, you know, mud. And they have paid out settlement dollars of over $10 billion. I think actually amounting to close to $12 billion for more than 100,000 plaintiffs that have asserted that they've contracted non-Hodgkin's lymphoma from exposure to this chemical. So it's huge. It's very significant concern around the world. Another recent study that is really alarming is that in December, the EPA, which was then still under the Trump administration, released a report that 93% of plants and animals on the endangered species list were threatened directly by glyphosate, largely from destruction of habitat. And so, I mean, the studies damning glyphosate in the environment are coming out all the time. Just recently, a couple of weeks ago, there was a study from the Journal of Molecular Biology and Evolution showing that glyphosate was causing antibiotic-resistant bacteria in the soil. So anyway, it's banned in over 17 countries. We need to just stop spraying this on the North Woods in Maine. And we also need to know how much of all kinds of pesticides are being sprayed, where and when, and for what purposes.
Thank you, Heather. That's super helpful. There have been some questions about other herbicides and pesticides and the best way to sort of wrap our heads around the complexity of this problem. And one question that I really like the direction this one is going: should we be banning glyphosate generally? Aerial spray sounds terrible, but it doesn't sound like we should be putting this anywhere in any way. What are the alternatives, and what's the path forward? Is it banned in other states? Tell us a little bit more about that.
I'll just quickly note that 17 countries have banned glyphosate, Mexico most recently. There are a number of bills in the legislature this session that are seeking to address specific uses of glyphosate. Representative Gramlich has one bill in particular that is going to limit the use of herbicides with emphasis on glyphosate near schools. I think that, yes, we want to phase out the use of these chemicals, especially for, aesthetic purposes or really unnecessary purposes. This particular bill, LD 125, is a really important step that gets at a number of different environmental and ecological health issues. So I appreciate that, but I guess for today's conversation, we're really focusing on the use of glyphosate in forestry. And I think that, Mitch and Peter can talk about how you do it, and Troy, of course, as a logger, they can talk about how you can do this without the use of glyphosate and aerial spraying.
Can I speak?
Yeah, it would be great to hear what some of the non-spray options are to counter the argument that we don't have a choice, because it sounds like we do.
Yeah. Well, first of all, there is tracking of how many acres get sprayed in the forest by forest landowner type, and that's done every year with the Maine Forest Service Silvicultural Practices Report. And starting in 2013 and going to 2018, use has increased quite a bit. It went from 1,300 acres in 2013 up to over 16,000 acres in 2018. So there are some trends that you could see from that. It doesn't tell you what type of herbicide they're using or how much concentration, but it tells you how many acres. In terms of what could be done, there was a song when I was a kid where the line was, "Got along without you before I met you, gonna get along without you now." And there's a lot of options. The first thing is just don't base your whole cutting program on clear cuts. Doing partial cuts that leave behind a lot of wood is just as good, if not better, than doing even age management. Quebec, Oregon, both banned aerial spraying of herbicides on public lands. The Bureau of Parks and Lands sprays almost nothing, did very little, but they've done a little bit in just the last few years because of other factors, which it would take a while to talk about. But Baxter State Park Scientific Forest Management Area, which is the northern part of the park, and it's supposed to set an example of scientific management, it doesn't do aerial spraying of herbicides at all. They do partial cuts and patch cuts, and it seems to work. And Bureau of Public Lands only does 1 year they did 26 acres of clear cuts, and they own 600,000 acres of public lands. So like I said in my presentation, which I don't know how much you heard of it, but if you don't clear cut, you don't need to spray herbicides. So there's.
Oh, there it goes.
I think that may have been an unintentional muting, but it really underlined that if you don't clear cut, you don't need to spray. It was perfect timing. So that's not necessarily the message we are hearing from Maine's largest landowner, which is a Canadian company, Irving. Senator Jackson, did you say that Irving is responsible for the vast majority, if not all, of the aerial herbicide spraying in Maine's forests? And does that mean we've got that huge corporate influence on our public policy here?
years ago, they were the ones that, you know, that they were the only ones I knew did it. I think the last, you know, 4, 5, 6 years, there's been a couple others that have started doing it too. And I believe that's probably because of outcome-based forestry, the allowance under outcome-based forestry to have more clear cutting, less restrictions. And so it has been a little bit surprising to me that there's been some other large landowners that have started doing it. In addition, the thing about it is they kind of all circle the wagons whenever one has an issue. But you know, what I find so mystifying about this whole thing is, on one hand, they'll argue that if we stop aerial herbicide spraying, that is going to mean the loss of jobs in the North Maine woods, which is obviously, even if it's not the reality, it causes great concern. But on the other hand, bills that I have down here designed to make sure that Maine loggers get the opportunities, they'll argue that there's not enough people in Maine to do the work. So it seems to me that if we got rid of the aerial herbicide spraying, lowering the amount of jobs, we'd have just the right amount of people here in Maine that would have work. But what do I know?
That math makes sense to me. Thank you. We sometimes hear that planting lots of new trees is a good approach to sequestering carbon, and that the big forestry companies are certainly talking about this. What does clear cutting and aerial spraying, what does that do to our net carbon emissions? Is there a difference in the timing? Heather, is that something you want to go into?
I can speak a little bit about that. I know that it is, it certainly is something that that Mitch Lansky has written extensively about, that there's sort of a myth that planting lots of new, you know, having plantation style management with lots of young new growth can suck up all the carbon much more quickly than old multi-stage forests. The research that I've read from Mitch, I don't know if he's back with us or not yet, but
I'm back.
yeah. Do you want to take this, Mitch? I was just going to talk, you know, yeah, thank you. You're the pro on this.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, you know, planting trees isn't so bad if you're growing a forest, but Irving cuts down the existing forest so they could plant the trees, and there's a lot more carbon in the existing trees than in the seedlings. So how much carbon you have in the forest determines how much, what you need to know is what is the average across the landscape of how many cords per acre you have, because that tells you what the above ground carbon is. It doesn't tell you what below ground carbon is. And if you do clear cuts on short rotation, then you're averaging out whatever has trees with stands that have no trees. So you're going to have a smaller average. If you do partial cuts and you allow the forest to grow to high volumes, and frankly, the high volume stands have better quality wood that's worth more money, then if you do your partial cut and you leave a good amount of wood behind, your average is going to be a lot.
So I'll just say, you know, in a nutshell, I think that the research that Mitch has done shows that clear cuts and planting of small, you know, small new trees, when you do this clear cutting and you have all the slash left behind, and then you kill everything with herbicides, you can be contributing carbon pollution, net excess of carbon into the atmosphere for 10 or 15 years. So I think
I would, that's what I was about to say. When I got cut off again. Sorry about that cutting off.
It sounds like it would be a
Senator
good
Jackson
step to
could
get.
help get rid of pitlock better.
It sounds like there's some really great research out there, and judging from the questions, folks who definitely want to follow up with that, there's some good work from scientists at the Nature Conservancy and others who that show that older forests do sequester more carbon over time. So this is not it's not a straightforward answer here. Let me see what else.
Well, I just find that this is an interesting part of this whole discussion because, you know, throughout my time, I never heard people talking about carbon or sequestering carbon or anything like that as far as for why this was such a good argument to do. But it does seem over the last couple of years with the Climate Council and the administration talking about climate goals and stuff like that, all of a sudden this became part of the argument of why it's a good thing to do, that this will create more carbon sequestration and stuff like that, which is an amazing change for me, that you have to kill everything so that you can sequester carbon. I mean, it would seem to me that if you let things growing that are already doing that, you would probably be able to store more carbon than by killing everything and then starting over again. But you know, the reality is that this is just an alternate reality for a lot of people. And in the end, it's about the bottom line, and whatever argument is needed will come forward to further that bottom line.
Well, we can help counter that, right, with arguments of our own, and really grateful to all of you for being with us today. Senator Jackson, Peter Haggerty, Mitch Lansky, Jim Garrettson, Heather Spalding, you are a dream team, and I really appreciate the picture that you've painted for us about this issue and about how urgent it is. To all of you who joined us, thank you so much. This afternoon, you will get an email with links to some more information and an opportunity to click through and send emails to your state legislators and your governor. We are grateful to all of you for taking that step. I hope you can join us next Friday. We have a very exciting program planned. Congressman Jared Golden is going to join us to tell us a little bit about what life is like as a congressman and what is on his mind as he's advocating for all of us in Washington. Till then, thank you all. Have a beautiful weekend. We will see you soon.